John 6:71. Dicebat autem Iudam Simonis Scariotis, hic enim erat traditurus eum, cum esset unus ex duodecim. For he was speaking of Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, for this man was about to, or was intending to, betray him, though he was one of the 12. In this last verse of chapter 6, we get some interesting foreshadowing, some interesting information, explaining in part what Jesus meant in the last verse when he said, one of you is a diabolos, is a devil in the English tradition. In Greek, an accuser or slanderer, borrowing from the Hebrew word Satan, which means the same thing. So here we learn a little bit more about Judas, and we get a couple interesting grammatical constructions that are worth dwelling on for a moment. So autem probably is connecting us to what came just before rather than introducing something adversative. So moreover, or for even in English, he was speaking, and we might have expected, de plus ablative. He was speaking about so-and-so, but we don't get that. We just have, he was, probably in English we would say he was mentioning or he was alluding to this guy, Judas in English. And then we get his patronymic here. And the genitive in Latin is often sufficient for indicating patronymics, the name of a father. So this is son of Simon, surnamed Iscariot. At least that's the English form, indicating the place from which he hailed. And then we get some further information about him. Probably in English we might put a semicolon or a pause or something like that here. For this guy, hic erat traditurus. And this is a construction we've actually seen before. It's called the future periphrastic construction, and it consists of a future active participle plus a form of sum, and it's a way of indicating something about the relative time in which something's going to happen, the chronology of an event, removing as much ambiguity as possible and making it clear that in the past, looking towards the future, we could say he was going to betray Jesus. The betrayal hadn't happened yet, and we're talking about events in the past, and we're looking from that perspective forward. It's all a little bit confusing if you think about it too much. This is one case where actually thinking just through the English will help you keep things straight in your mind. For this man was going to, or was about to, was intending to even betray him, eum meaning Jesus. And then this last clause is really interesting as well, cum esset unus ex duodecim. It's interesting because the Greek really just has unus ex duodecim in apposition to what we've already heard about Judas. So he who was one from the 12. Again, that's explicitly harking back to what Jesus had said in the previous verse, explaining what he meant. Cum esset really is a sort of interpretation, a further interpretation of our translator, although it should be said that in some Greek manuscripts there is a participle here in Greek saying, this man, Judas, was going to betray him, this man who was one of the 12, or being one of the 12, literally. In Greek, the participle is on that we have here. So it could be that our Latin translator is translating that from certain Greek manuscripts, or that he's very ever so slightly expanding here in order to make this crystal clear. And the effect in Latin is to add a concessive sense, which we should probably interpret as although he was one of the 12. Here, cum appears with the subjunctive to indicate despite or although something else. So although he was one of the 12, or despite the fact that he was one of the 12.